The rain pelted against my apartment window like tiny bullets, each drop a reminder of how exposed we were. My 6-month-old daughter Emma slept soundly in her second-hand crib, blissfully unaware of the stack of unpaid bills on our wobbly kitchen table or the eviction notice tucked beneath them. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching the city lights blur through my tears. The weight of single motherhood pressed down on my shoulders, heavier than the damp air surrounding our tiny apartment. "We'll make it work somehow," I whispered to Emma, though the words felt hollow even to my own ears. I'd been working double shifts at Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, scraping together barely enough to keep a roof over our heads. My fingers were raw from washing dishes, my feet ached from hours of standing, and the dark circles under my eyes had become a permanent feature of my face. But Emma was worth it. She was worth everything. I still remembered the night I met Marco, tall, dark-haired, with eyes that seemed to hold all the mysteries of the universe. He'd swept into my life for 3 whirlwind months before disappearing without a trace, leaving nothing but a broken heart and, as I would discover weeks later, a baby growing inside me. No phone number, no address, not even a last name I could be certain was real. Just Marco from Naples, who spoke of business opportunities and family connections with a glint in his eye I was too naive to recognize as dangerous. A crack of thunder startled Emma awake, her cries piercing the silence of our apartment. I rushed to her side, scooping her tiny body into my arms. "Shh, baby girl, Mommy's here," I soothed, rocking her gently. "Mommy's always here." The rain continued to pound against the windows as I hummed a lullaby, Emma's eyelids growing heavy once more. She had his eyes, deep, dark, and somehow knowing beyond her months. Sometimes when she looked at me, I could almost see Marco staring back, and my heart would twist with a confusing mixture of love and resentment. The next morning dawned gray and miserable, matching my mood as I bundled Emma up for our walk to Mrs. Chen's apartment. The elderly woman watched Emma while I worked, charging me far less than any daycare would. Her kindness was one of the few things keeping me afloat. "You look tired, Sophia," Mrs. Chen remarked, taking Emma from my arms. "More than usual." I forced a smile. "Just another late shift. Thank you again for watching her. This baby is no trouble," she said, bouncing Emma gently. "But you need to take care of yourself too." I kissed Emma's forehead, inhaling her sweet baby scent before reluctantly turning to leave. "I'll pick her up at 11. Bellini's was already bustling when I arrived, the lunch crowd filling the elegant dining room with chatter and the clinking of fine china. I slipped through the back entrance, tying my black apron around my waist and pulling my hair into a tight bun. As a server, I was invisible to most patrons, just another body moving efficiently between tables, refilling water glasses and delivering steaming plates of pasta. "Table 12 just got seated," Mia, another server, informed me as she passed with a tray of drinks. "Big spenders by the looks of it." I nodded, grabbing my notepad and making my way to the section I'd been assigned. Table 12 sat in the corner, partially obscured by one of the restaurant's ornate columns. I put on my professional smile, rounding the corner to greet my new guests. "Good afternoon, welcome to Belle." The words died in my throat. 4 men in tailored suits occupied the table, but my eyes locked onto only one. Sitting with his back to the wall, commanding an unobstructed view of the entire restaurant, was Marco. He looked exactly as I remembered, yet somehow more intimidating. His dark hair was styled impeccably, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. The suit he wore probably cost more than my entire year's rent. But it was his eyes, those eyes that had haunted my dreams for over a year, that froze me in place. For a moment, neither of us moved. I felt the color drain from my face as my hand gripped the notepad so tightly my knuckles turned white. Did he recognize me? Would he even remember the waitress he'd spent those nights with before disappearing? My heart thundered in my chest, and I silently prayed he wouldn't notice how badly my hands were shaking. His gaze swept over me, lingering just a second too long before shifting to one of his companions. If he recognized me, he gave no indication. The knot in my stomach loosened slightly, replaced by a hollow ache. Of course he wouldn't remember. I had been nothing but a fleeting diversion. "I'll have the Barolo, 2010, he said, his Italian accent washing over me like a wave of memories. And whatever my associates prefer. I nodded mechanically, taking the rest of their orders while avoiding eye contact with Marco. My mind raced. What was he doing here? Bellini's was upscale, but hardly the type of establishment I would expect to find him in. And those men with him, they carried themselves with the same dangerous confidence, eyes constantly scanning the room. As I turned to leave, I heard Marco's voice again. Wait. I froze, slowly turning back toward the table. Have we met before? He asked. His head tilted slightly as he studied my face. The other men at the table exchanged glances. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I don't believe so, sir. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I could see him processing, searching his memory. You look familiar. I've worked here for almost a year, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Perhaps you've dined with us before. He smiled then, a slow, predatory curl of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps. I escaped to the kitchen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Marco was here, the father of my child, sitting less than 50 feet away, completely unaware that his daughter existed. The urge to run was overwhelming. I could call Mrs. Chen, grab Emma, and disappear. But where would we go? With what money? You okay? Mia asked, noticing my distress as I leaned against the wall. You look like you've seen a ghost, something like that, I murmured. The rest of their meal passed in a blur of anxiety. I delivered their food, refilled their glasses, and cleared their plates with mechanical efficiency, avoiding Marco's gaze whenever possible. But I could feel his eyes on me, tracking my movements across the restaurant. By the time they requested the check, my nerves were frayed to the breaking point. I placed the leather folder on the table, praying they would pay quickly and leave. Marco reached for it, his fingers brushing against mine. The brief contact sent an electric jolt through my body, memories of those same hands on my skin rushing back uninvited. Thank you for your service, he said, sliding several large bills into the folder without even looking at the total. Keep the change. I nodded my thanks, turning to leave when his next word stopped me cold. Sophia. My name on his lips made me freeze. He remembered. It is Sophia, isn't it? Marco continued, his voice low and smooth. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. Yes. I never forget a beautiful face, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting in a half smile. Especially one that has haunted me for so long. His companions shifted uncomfortably, one of them checking his watch with pointed impatience. We should go, boss, the largest of them muttered. We have that meeting, boss. The word echoed in my mind, pieces suddenly falling into place. The expensive suits, the watchful eyes, the deference of his companions. Marco wasn't just some businessman with family connections. He was something else entirely. Marco waved a dismissive hand, his eyes never leaving mine. What time do you finish work today, Sophia? I'm afraid I'm quite busy, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. That wasn't what I asked. His tone remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath the surface. 11, I answered automatically, then immediately regretted it. I'll have a car waiting. It wasn't a request. Before I could protest, they were rising from the table, Marco's companions forming a protective formation around him as they moved toward the exit. One remained slightly behind, slipping me a small card with nothing but a phone number embossed in gold. If there's any problem, he said quietly before following the others. I stood frozen, the card burning between my fingers like a hot coal. The rest of my shift passed in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Should I run? Call the police? But what would I tell them? That the father of my child, who didn't know about her existence, had asked to meet me after work. By the time 11 o'clock arrived, I'd made my decision. I would face Marco, tell him I wanted nothing from him, and make it clear that my life, our lives, were better without his interference. I changed out of my uniform in the employee bathroom, the fancy blouse and skirt I'd worn to work suddenly seeming hopelessly inadequate. As promised, a sleek black car idled outside the restaurant's service entrance. The same large man from earlier held the door open for me without a word. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, But where would I go? Marco had found me once. He could find me again. Better to face this now, on my terms. The interior of the car was plush leather, the privacy divider already raised between us and the driver. We rode in silence through the city streets, the lights blurring past the tinted windows. Finally, the car slowed to a stop outside an exclusive high-rise overlooking the river. "This way," my escort said, leading me through a private entrance where security nodded deferentially as we passed. The elevator required a keycard to access the penthouse level. My stomach lurched as we ascended, partly from the rapid rise and partly from the knowledge that with each floor, I was being carried further away from Emma. Mrs. Chen would be worried by now. "May I use your phone?" I asked. "I need to let my babysitter know I'll be late." The man regarded me for a moment before extracting a cell phone from his jacket. "Make it quick." I dialed Mrs. Chen's number with trembling fingers, assuring her I was fine and would be there soon to pick up Emma. I deliberately avoided details, aware of the man listening to every word. When I handed the phone back, I noticed his expression had changed, a flicker of curiosity crossing his stoic features. The elevator doors opened directly into a stunning penthouse apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city spread out below like a carpet of stars. The furnishings were minimal, but obviously expensive, the space larger than any home I'd ever been in. And there, standing by the windows with a glass of amber liquid in his hand, was Marco. "Leave us," he commanded, not turning around. My escort retreated to the elevator, disappearing behind closing doors. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I remained near the elevator, unwilling to move deeper into his territory. "You disappeared," Marco finally said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "One morning you were gone, without a word." I almost laughed at the irony. I could say the same about you. He turned then, and I was struck by the intensity in his eyes. "I had business to attend to. When I returned, you had vanished." "Business," I repeated flatly. "Is that what you call it? My work is complicated." He set his glass down on a nearby table, taking a step toward me. "But I never forgot you, Sophia. What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He studied me for a long moment. "You've changed. A lot can happen in 15 months. His eyes narrowed at the specific time frame. "Yes, I suppose it can." The air between us crackled with tension as he moved closer, each step deliberate. I forced myself to hold my ground, even as my heart raced. "You have a child," he said suddenly. It wasn't a question. The blood drained from my face. "How did you—" "You called a babysitter," he replied, gesturing to where his man had stood. "Antonio hears everything." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "Yes, I have responsibilities now. I should get back to them." "A husband?" The question was casual, but his eyes had hardened. "No." "The child's father, then?" I hesitated, torn between truth and self-preservation. "Not in the picture." Marco was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, the same scent that had once clung to my bedsheets. "How old is your child, Sophia?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I knew in that moment that my answer would irrevocably change the course of our lives. 6 months, I whispered. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A calculation, a realization. Boy or girl? Girl. Marco nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. "I think," he said carefully, "that we have much to discuss." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. In my desperate attempt to protect Emma, had I made a terrible mistake? The truth lay exposed between us now, impossible to take back. I thought of my daughter, sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Chen's, unaware that her entire world was about to change. "I should go," I said, turning toward the elevator. "It's late. And my daughter." "Our daughter," Marco corrected, the words stopping me in my tracks, "needs her mother and her father." My heart hammered against my ribs. The words hung in the air between us. Our daughter. So casually spoken, yet so monumental in their implications. "You can't just walk into our lives and claim her," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain calm. "You don't know anything about her, about us." Marco's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his dark eyes, then enlightened me. "This isn't a conversation we should be having right now. I need to get back to her." He nodded once, decisively. "We'll go together." "No," I said too quickly, panic rising in my throat. The thought of Marco seeing Emma, of him entering our small, shabby apartment, sent waves of anxiety through me. "That's not necessary. It wasn't a suggestion." His voice was soft, but left no room for argument. He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen once. "Antonio will drive us. Marco, please." I hated the pleading note in my voice. "This is all happening too fast." He paused, studying me for a long moment. 15 months, Sophia. I've missed 15 months of my daughter's life already. I won't miss another minute." The elevator doors opened, and Antonio materialized as if he'd been waiting just on the other side. Marco gestured for me to enter first, his hand coming to rest lightly at the small of my back. The touch was gentle but unmistakably possessive. The ride to Mrs. Chen's apartment passed in tense silence. I stared out the window, mind racing as I tried to formulate a plan, some way to protect Emma from whatever complicated, dangerous world Marco inhabited, but with each passing minute, control slipped further from my grasp. When we pulled up outside Mrs. Chen's building, I turned to Marco. "Wait here, please. Let me explain things to my neighbor first." He considered this, then nodded. 5 minutes. I practically ran up the 3 flights of stairs to Mrs. Chen's apartment, my breath coming in short gasps that had nothing to do with the exertion. The elderly woman opened her door at my first knock, concern etched across her face. "Sophia, I was worried. It's so late. I'm sorry," I said, stepping inside and immediately moving to where Emma slept in the portable crib I'd set up in Mrs. Chen's living room. My daughter's peaceful face sent a surge of protectiveness through me. Something unexpected came up. Mrs. Chen followed my gaze, her expression softening. "She's been an angel as always." I gathered Emma's things with trembling hands, trying to think clearly. "Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you something. The man who... Emma's father has found us." Her eyes widened. "Is this good news or bad?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, carefully lifting my sleeping daughter into my arms. "But I think things are going to change." She patted my arm sympathetically. "You call me if you need anything, day or night." I thanked her, securing Emma in her carrier before making my way back downstairs. Each step felt like I was moving toward an inevitable collision, a future I couldn't see but could sense looming before me. Marco stood beside the car, his tall figure illuminated by a nearby streetlight. When he saw us approach, something changed in his posture, a subtle straightening, an alertness that hadn't been there before. His eyes fixed on the small bundle in my arms with an intensity that made me instinctively hold Emma closer. "Is that her?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I nodded, unable to find words as he stepped forward. For a moment, we stood in silence on the sidewalk, this strange tableau of a family that had never been together before. Marco reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly before he carefully, reverently, pulled back the blanket to reveal Emma's sleeping face. His sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the quiet street. "She has my mother's nose," he whispered, a note of wonder in his voice I'd never heard before. "And my eyes." Emma stirred slightly, her tiny fingers flexing before she settled again. Marco watched, transfixed, as if she'd performed some miraculous feat. "What's her name?" he asked, still staring at her. Emma, he repeated, testing the name. "Emma Rossi." I blinked in surprise. "I don't know your last name." A shadow passed over his features. "Now you do." He looked up at me, his expression hardening. "She's a Rossi. My blood." The possessiveness in his voice sent a chill through me. Before I could respond, he was opening the car door, gesturing for me to get in. "We should get her home. It's cold out here." The drive to my apartment was mercifully short. I kept my eyes on Emma, avoiding Marco's gaze as he sat unnaturally still beside me, his attention fixed on our daughter. When we arrived, I hesitated before leading him upstairs. My apartment suddenly seemed shamefully inadequate. The peeling paint, the secondhand furniture, the dampness that never quite went away. It's not much, I said defensively as I unlocked the door. But it's clean and safe. Marco said nothing as he followed me inside, his eyes taking in every detail of our small home. I carried Emma to her crib, gently laying her down without waking her. When I turned back, Marco stood in the doorway of the bedroom, his imposing figure seeming to fill the entire space. "This is where my daughter sleeps?" he asked, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of something dangerous. "Yes," I replied, lifting my chin. "I've done the best I can." He moved past me to stand over the crib, looking down at Emma. For a long moment, he was silent, his face unreadable in the dim light from the hallway. Then he spoke, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. "She deserves better than this." The words stung more than I expected. "I've given her everything I can. Everything you can," he repeated, turning to face me. "But not everything she deserves." "We manage," I said stiffly. "No more." His tone left no room for argument. "This ends now." Fear gripped me. "What does that mean?" Marco stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. "It means that my daughter, our daughter, will have everything she needs. The best schools, the best opportunities, the best protection." "Protection?" I echoed, the word sending a chill through me. "Why would she need protection?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Because she's a Rossi." "And what exactly does that mean, Marco? Who are you, really?" He was quiet for a moment, weighing his words. "My family has interests. Business throughout the country. Connections across the world. Business," I said flatly. "The kind that requires men like Antonio?" "The kind that provides for generations," he corrected. "The kind that means my daughter will never want for anything." I crossed my arms. "And what's the price for that security?" His eyes hardened. "There is no price when it comes to family." "There's always a price," I insisted. "And I won't have Emma paying it." Marco stepped closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming in the small room. "You don't understand what I'm offering you. Both of you. Then explain it to me. A life without struggle, without..." He gestured around the apartment. "This. Emma would have everything. The best education, opportunities you can't even imagine. With you," I said, the implication clear. "With us," he corrected, "her family." I shook my head. "We don't even know each other, Marco. 3 months over a year ago doesn't make us family." "But Emma does." His voice softened as he glanced back at the crib. "She changes everything." I followed his gaze to our sleeping daughter, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully, unaware of the life-altering conversation happening above her. Could I deny her the advantages Marco was offering? Could I live with myself if I did? "I need time," I said finally. It's too much to process at once." Marco nodded slowly. "Time, of course." He reached into his jacket pocket, extracting a sleek business card. "My private number. Call me tomorrow and we'll discuss arrangements." "Arrangements?" I repeated warily. "For a more suitable living situation," he clarified. "Temporary. Until we determine a more permanent solution." I took the card, my fingers brushing against his. The brief contact sent an unwelcome jolt through me, memories of those same hands on my skin rushing back. "I should go," he said, stepping back. "It's late, and you both need rest." I walked him to the door, hyper-aware of his presence behind me. At the threshold, he paused, turning back to face me. "Sophia," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I want you to know. Finding you, finding out about Emma, it changes things. For me." "How?" I asked, searching his face for some hint of the man I'd thought I knew 15 months ago. "I've spent my life building something, protecting something that was handed down to me. I never questioned why, until now." His eyes met mine, intense and sincere. "Now I have something of my own to protect." Before I could respond, he leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. The gesture was so unexpected, so at odds with the dangerous aura he projected, that I found myself frozen in place. "Tomorrow," he reminded me, then turned and disappeared down the hallway. I closed the door, sliding the deadbolt into place, though I knew it would provide no real barrier if Marco decided to return. My legs suddenly weak, I sank to the floor, back against the door, as the full impact of the night's events washed over me. Marco had found us. He knew about Emma, and nothing would ever be the same again. I must have dozed off there on the floor because the next thing I knew, Emma's cries were pulling me from a fitful sleep. Sunlight streamed through the windows, revealing the shabby details of our apartment in harsh clarity. As I rose stiffly to my feet, I caught sight of myself in the small mirror by the door. Pale, disheveled, with dark circles under my eyes, I hardly recognized myself. Emma's cries grew more insistent. I moved to the crib, lifting her into my arms and breathing in her sweet baby scent. "Good morning, little one," I murmured, trying to inject normalcy into my voice. "Did you sleep well?" As I prepared her bottle, my mind replayed the events of the previous night. Marco's face when he first saw Emma. The way he'd called her my blood, the promises of a better life that sounded suspiciously like golden handcuffs. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from an unknown number. "I've taken the liberty of arranging a few things. Antonio will be downstairs at noon. M." I stared at the message, a mixture of indignation and anxiety rising in my chest. The presumption of it, as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. I glanced around our tiny apartment, seeing it suddenly through Marco's eyes. The water stain spreading across the ceiling, the threadbare carpet, the second-hand furniture I'd scrounged from thrift stores. Was this really the best I could provide for Emma? My daughter gurgled happily in my arms, oblivious to the turmoil around her. I pressed my lips to her forehead, breathing in her scent. "What are we going to do, sweet girl?" The morning passed in a haze of routine, feeding Emma, bathing her, playing with her on the worn rug, while my mind raced with possibilities. I could run, take Emma and disappear. But with what money? And how far would we get before Marco found us? The man clearly had resources I couldn't begin to fathom. At 11:30, I packed a diaper bag with trembling hands. Whatever Marco had arranged, I needed to be prepared. Extra diapers, wipes, formula, a change of clothes for Emma, her favorite stuffed rabbit. I dressed her in her nicest outfit, a pale yellow dress with tiny embroidered flowers that Mrs. Chen had given us. As for myself, I put on the only dress I owned that wasn't part of my waitress uniform, a simple blue wrap dress that had seen better days. At precisely noon, my phone buzzed again. "We're downstairs. M." Taking a deep breath, I settled Emma in her carrier and slung the diaper bag over my shoulder. Each step down the stairs felt like I was moving towards something inevitable, a current too strong to resist pulling us into Marco's orbit. Outside, the same sleek black car from the previous night idled at the curb. Antonio stood beside it, his imposing figure drawing curious glances from passers-by. When he saw us, he straightened, moving to open the rear door. "Ms. Mitchell," he greeted with a slight nod. "Mr. Rossi is waiting for you." I hesitated at the threshold of the car. "Where are we going?" Antonio's expression remained impassive. "Mr. Rossi will explain everything." Taking a deep breath, I ducked into the car, settling Emma's carrier beside me. To my surprise, Marco wasn't inside. Instead, a woman with sleek dark hair and sharp eyes regarded me coolly from the opposite seat. "Ms. Mitchell," she said, her tone brisk and professional. "I'm Diana Vega, Mr. Rossi's personal assistant. He's asked me to escort you today." "Where is he?" I asked, buckling Emma's carrier securely. "Handling a business matter," Diana replied, her eyes flicking to Emma with barely concealed curiosity. "He'll join us later." The car pulled smoothly away from the curb, merging into the midday traffic. Diana didn't volunteer any more information, and I was too proud to ask. Instead, I focused on Emma, who had fallen asleep in her carrier, blissfully unaware of the tension surrounding her. We drove for nearly 30 minutes, leaving behind my modest neighborhood for increasingly affluent areas of the city. Finally, the car turned down a tree-lined street of elegant townhouses, stopping before one with a glossy black door and pristine white facade. "We're here," Diana announced, checking her phone briefly before stepping out of the car. Antonio appeared at my door, offering a hand I ignored as I carefully extracted Emma's carrier. The townhouse loomed before us, 3 stories of understated luxury that probably cost more than I would earn in several lifetimes. "Mr. Rossi had this property prepared for you," Diana explained, leading us up the front steps. "It's fully furnished and stocked with everything you might need." My steps faltered. "For me? You mean for us to stay here?" Diana unlocked the door with a sleek keycard, gesturing for me to enter. "Mr. Rossi thought you might appreciate a more suitable environment for the child." The interior of the townhouse stole my breath. Sunlight streamed through tall windows onto hardwood floors, illuminating a tastefully decorated living space with cream-colored furniture and abstract artwork. Fresh flowers sat in a crystal vase on a coffee table that probably cost more than my entire apartment's contents. "The nursery is upstairs, first door on the right," Diana continued, seemingly unfazed by my stunned silence. "The kitchen has been stocked according to the dietary preferences found in your apartment." A chill ran through me. "You were in my apartment?" Diana didn't even blink. "A team was dispatched this morning to assess your needs and ensure this transition would be as seamless as possible." "I never agreed to move," I said, finding my voice. This is insane." "Mr. Rossi thought you might say that." She produced an envelope from her purse. "He asked me to give you this." I took the envelope with trembling fingers, shifting Emma's carrier to my other hand. Inside was a check with more zeros than I had ever seen, along with a handwritten note in elegant script. "For Emma's future. Non-negotiable. We'll discuss the rest tonight, Em." My legs suddenly weak, I sank onto the nearest chair, the luxurious fabric strange against my skin. "This is too much. Mr. Rossi was quite clear that there would be no discussion on this matter," Diana said, checking her watch. "The nursery has been prepared according to pediatric recommendations. Your belongings will be delivered this afternoon." "My belongings?" I echoed faintly. "But I didn't pack anything." "A team is handling it." Diana moved toward the door. "Mr. Rossi will join you for dinner at 7. The kitchen is fully stocked, or you may order in. There's a list of approved restaurants by the phone. Antonio will remain outside for security." "Security?" I repeated, the word sending a fresh wave of anxiety through me. "Are we in danger?" Diana's expression softened slightly for the first time. "It's merely a precaution, Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Rossi's position necessitates certain measures." With that cryptic statement, she left, the door clicking shut behind her. I sat frozen for several moments, the check heavy in my hand, the enormity of what was happening slowly sinking in. Emma stirred in her carrier, her tiny face scrunching as she woke from her nap. "It's okay, baby," I murmured, lifting her into my arms. "Mommy's got you." But did I? The ground beneath my feet felt increasingly unstable, as if I were being swept into a current too powerful to resist. Curiosity eventually overcame my apprehension, and with Emma balanced on my hip, I began to explore our new, temporary, I reminded myself firmly, home. The kitchen gleamed with high-end appliances and marble countertops. The refrigerator was indeed stocked with all of Emma's favorite foods, along with items I recognized from my own sparse pantry, plus delicacies I'd never be able to afford. Upstairs, I pushed open the door to what Diana had called the nursery, then stopped short. The room was a vision in soft yellows and creams, with a hand-carved wooden crib that must have cost a fortune. A plush rocking chair sat in the corner beside a bookshelf filled with children's books. A changing table was stocked with diapers, wipes, creams, all the expensive brands I'd longingly eyed in stores before settling for the generic alternatives. "How did he do all this overnight?" I whispered to Emma, who squirmed in my arms, reaching toward a mobile of delicate fabric butterflies hanging above the crib. The adjacent room revealed a master bedroom, with a king-sized bed draped in luxurious linens. The attached bathroom featured a deep soaking tub and shower with more buttons and nozzles than I knew what to do with. My meager toiletries would look absurdly out of place here. As promised, around 3 o'clock, a team of efficient men and women arrived with boxes containing our belongings. They worked with military precision, unpacking my clothes into the walk-in closet, setting up Emma's toys in the nursery, arranging my few personal items throughout the house to create the illusion that this had always been our home. I watched in bewildered silence, Emma dozing against my shoulder. When they finished, one of them handed me a new phone. Mr. Rossi insists you use this, he explained. For security purposes. I accepted it reluctantly, setting it aside on a table. As the team departed, the silence of the townhouse enveloped us, broken only by Emma's soft breathing and the distant ticking of an antique clock. The hours until 7 stretched endlessly. I bathed Emma in the nursery's custom-sized tub, marveling at how she immediately took to the new surroundings, cooing and splashing happily. After dressing her in a fresh outfit from her new wardrobe, all her size, all designer labels, I fed her dinner in a high chair that appeared to have been custom-made. At precisely 6:55, a soft knock came at the door. My heart leaped into my throat. Taking a deep breath, I settled Emma in her playpen and moved to answer it. Marco stood on the threshold, impeccably dressed in another tailored suit, his dark hair slightly damp as if he'd recently showered. His eyes moved past me, scanning the interior of the townhouse before returning to my face. "May I come in?" he asked. The politeness at odds with the fact that he technically owned the place, I stepped back, allowing him entry. He moved with that same fluid grace I remembered, his presence immediately filling the space in a way that made the generous rooms feel suddenly smaller. "Where's Emma?" he asked, his voice softer when speaking our daughter's name. "In the living room," I replied, leading him there. Emma looked up from her playpen, her dark eyes, so like Marco's, widening at the sight of a stranger. For a moment I feared she might cry, but instead she offered a gummy smile, reaching up with chubby arms. Marco froze, visibly affected by this simple gesture of acceptance. He looked to me, uncertainty flashing across his features. "You can hold her," I said, surprised by my own willingness. "She's usually good with new people." With a gentleness that belied his imposing stature, Marco lifted Emma from the playpen, cradling her carefully as if she were made of glass. Emma reached up, her tiny hand patting his cheek with innocent curiosity. "Ciao, piccola," he murmured, his accent thickening with emotion. "I'm your papa." The intimacy of the moment made me look away, an unexpected lump forming in my throat. When I glanced back, Marco was watching me, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said. I nodded, gesturing to the dining room where I'd noticed a table set for 2. "I assume you've arranged dinner?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Of course." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Marco didn't move, still holding Emma close, so I went to answer it. A catering team entered, efficiently setting up an elaborate meal on the dining table, before departing as silently as they'd arrived. Marco settled Emma in the high chair positioned between our seats, his movements surprisingly natural for someone who'd only just met his child. He pulled out my chair with his free hand, the gesture oddly formal in the midst of our surreal situation. "You've been busy," I said as we sat, nodding toward the lavish spread of Italian dishes. "All of this in less than a day. When something is important, you don't waste time," he replied, his eyes fixed on Emma as she babbled happily, reaching for a piece of soft bread from her tray. "She seems comfortable here. Babies adapt quickly," I said. "It doesn't mean this is right." Marco's eyes flicked to mine. "What would be right, Sophia? That cramped apartment? The neighborhood where police sirens are a nightly lullaby?" I bristled at his dismissal. "It was all I could afford. I've done my best." "I know you have," he said, his tone softening. "But now you don't have to do it alone. What exactly are you proposing, Marco? That we play house? Pretend to be a family? I don't even know who you really are." He was quiet for a moment, absently helping Emma grasp her sippy cup. "What do you want to know?" "The truth," I said firmly, "starting with what you do for a living that requires armed guards and security measures." Marco sighed, setting down his fork. "My family has been in certain businesses for generations, import-export primarily, along with real estate, construction, waste management." "That sounds legitimate enough," I said skeptically. "So why all the security?" "Because not all of our competitors play by the rules," he replied, his voice hardening. "And because the Rossi name carries certain expectations." The implication of his words hung in the air between us. I wasn't naive. I'd seen enough movies, read enough news stories to recognize the euphemisms, the armed guards, the immediate resources, the way people deferred to him. It all painted a picture I'd been trying to deny since the moment I saw him at Bellini's. "You're in the Mafia," I said flatly, my voice barely above a whisper. Marco didn't flinch. "I prefer to think of it as a family business with traditional values and methods." "Traditional methods," I repeated, a humorless laugh escaping me. "Is that what we're calling it?" His expression remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Judge me if you must, Sophia, but understand this. Everything I do, everything my family has built, is about protection and provision. We take care of our own." Emma banged her sippy cup against her tray, oblivious to the tension crackling between her parents. Marco's expression softened as he glanced at her, gently wiping a smudge of food from her cheek with his napkin. "And now?" I asked, my throat tight. "What does this mean for her? For us?" "It means she will never want for anything," Marco said firmly. "It means she will be protected, educated, given every advantage. In your world," I countered. "A world of..." "What? Violence? Illegal activities?" Marco's jaw tightened. "My world is not so different from yours, Sophia. There are rules, consequences for breaking them. The difference is that I have the power to ensure those rules are followed." I shook my head, trying to process the enormity of what he was saying. I don't want Emma exposed to danger. I don't want her growing up surrounded by bodyguards and whatever else comes with being a Rossi. And I don't want my daughter growing up in poverty when I can provide her with everything," he countered, his voice taking on an edge. "Do you think I would ever let anything happen to her? To you?" The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver down my spine, half fear, half something else I didn't want to examine too closely. "You've given us a beautiful home," I acknowledged, gesturing around us. "But at what cost? What do you expect in return, Marco?" His eyes darkened. "Is it so hard to believe I simply want to know my daughter, to be part of her life? And me?" I pressed. "What do you want from me?" Marco was silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving mine. "I want what I've always wanted since the moment I met you, Sophia. You." The directness of his answer startled me. "You barely know me." "I knew enough to spend 3 months with you," he countered, "to think about you every day after you disappeared." I scoffed. "If that were true, you would have looked for me." "I did." His response was immediate, his tone hard. "When I returned from Naples and found you gone, no note, no forwarding address. I had my people search, but you'd left no trace, changed your phone number, even your job." The revelation stunned me. "You looked for me?" "Of course I did." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Do you think I make a habit of becoming involved with women, then simply forgetting them?" "I don't know what to think," I admitted. "You never told me who you really were, what your business entailed." "Would you have stayed if you knew?" he challenged. The question gave me pause. Would I have? The Marco I'd known had been charming, attentive, mysterious in a way that had been exciting rather than alarming. But if I'd known the truth, I don't know. I answered honestly. Emma began to fuss, her little face scrunching up in the way that meant she was getting tired. Without thinking, I rose to take her from the high chair, but Marco was faster, lifting her with a gentleness that continued to surprise me. "May I?" he asked, already cradling her against his chest. "I've missed so much already." I nodded, watching as he began to pace slowly around the room, murmuring to Emma in Italian. Despite everything, the sight tugged at something in my chest. This dangerous man holding our daughter with such tenderness, his voice soft as he spoke to her in his native tongue. "What are you telling her?" I asked. Marco glanced up, a rare smile softening his features. "That she's beautiful, that she has her mother's spirit, that I will never let anything hurt her." Emma's eyelids were growing heavy, her little head nestling against Marco's shoulder as she fought sleep. He continued his slow circuit of the room, his movements fluid and practiced, as if he'd been soothing babies to sleep his entire life instead of whatever it was he actually did. "You're good with her," I admitted reluctantly. "Children know when they're loved," he replied simply. "It's the purest form of understanding." I watched them together, my emotions a tangled mess. Part of me wanted to grab Emma and run far away from Marco and the dangerous world he represented. Another part, A part I was less comfortable acknowledging recognized that he could give her things I never could. Security. Opportunities. A father who clearly already adored her. "Where do we go from here?" I asked finally. Marco looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine. "That depends on what you want, Sophia." "What I want?" I echoed, surprised by the deference in his tone. I thought this was all non-negotiable. "The fact that I will be part of Emma's life is non-negotiable," he clarified. "How we arrange that is flexible." Emma had finally surrendered to sleep. Her tiny body relaxed against Marco's shoulder. He moved to the nursery with practiced ease, and I followed, watching as he gently laid her in the crib, tucking her favorite blanket around her. He stood looking down at her for a long moment, an expression of wonder on his face. "We could make this work," he said quietly, still watching our sleeping daughter, the three of us. "As what?" I asked, equally quiet. "Co-parents? Roommates?" Marco turned to face me, his eyes intense in the dim light of the nursery. "As a family. A real one." My heart skipped a beat. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," he said, taking a step toward me. "Marry me, Sophia." The proposal, if one could call such a statement a proposal, knocked the breath from my lungs. "Marco, this is insane. We barely know each other. We made a child together," he countered. "And despite what you may think, I remember everything about those 3 months. The way you take your coffee, how you hum when you're thinking, the birthmark on your left hip." Heat rushed to my face at the intimate reminder. "Physical attraction isn't a basis for marriage." "No," he agreed, "but it's not a hindrance either." His expression turned serious. "I'm not proposing out of obligation, Sophia. I want this. I want you. Both of you. And if I say no?" Something shifted in his eyes, not anger, but resolution. "Then we work out a different arrangement, but Emma is a Rossi. That's not negotiable." The underlying message was clear. One way or another, he would be part of our lives. The only question was whether I would be on the inside of his world or constantly fighting to keep Emma from being pulled into it. "I need time," I said finally. "This is too much to process all at once." Marco nodded slowly. "Of course. Take the time you need." He glanced at his watch. "I have some business to attend to, but I'll return tomorrow. Perhaps we could take Emma to the park. Do something normal." The suggestion of such an ordinary family activity from a man who was anything but ordinary nearly made me laugh. Instead, I nodded, walking with him back toward the front door. At the threshold, Marco paused, turning back to face me. "One thing you should know, Sophia. I meant what I said about protection. Antonio will remain outside, and there are other security measures in place, for your safety and Emma's." "Are we in danger?" I asked, the question that had been nagging at me since Diana's cryptic comments earlier. Marco's expression hardened. "Not if I have anything to say about it, but my position comes with complications. People who would use my family against me." "And now that includes us," I said, the reality of it sinking in. "Yes." He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. "But I promise you this, nothing will harm you or Emma while I draw breath." The intensity of his vow should have frightened me. Instead, I found myself believing him, despite everything. Whatever else Marco Rossi might be, his devotion to his newfound family seemed absolutely genuine. After he left, I walked through the townhouse in a daze, taking in the luxury that now surrounded us, the soft carpet beneath my feet, the expensive furniture, the state-of-the-art kitchen. All of it represented a life I'd never imagined for myself. A life Emma could have if I accepted Marco's proposition. But at what cost? I checked on Emma one last time before retiring to the master bedroom. She slept peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling, her dark lashes resting against her cheeks. She looked so innocent, so untouched by the complications that now surrounded her very existence. "What should we do, little one?" I whispered, though I knew she couldn't answer. "What's the right choice here?" Sleep eluded me that night despite the impossibly comfortable bed. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with possibilities, fears and memories of the time Marco and I had shared before. Memories that seemed to belong to a different life entirely. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through curtains I hadn't closed properly. I checked the baby monitor. Emma was still sleeping, exhausted from the previous day's excitement. Taking advantage of the rare quiet moment, I slipped downstairs to make coffee. The kitchen, with its gleaming countertops and professional-grade appliances, still felt like a movie set rather than a place I belonged. I located the coffee maker, far more complicated than necessary, and managed to brew a cup, carrying it to the window that overlooked a small, perfectly manicured garden. The peaceful scene was marred only by the presence of Antonio, standing vigilant by the gate. Security, Marco had called it. Protection, but it felt more like a gilded cage. My phone, the new one Marco had provided, chimed with a message. Expecting Marco, I was surprised to see Mia's name instead. "Where are you? Missed your shift yesterday and today. Manager is pissed. Everything okay?" Reality crashed back like a cold wave. In the whirlwind of the past 2 days, I'd completely forgotten about my job at Bellini's. The job that, meager as it was, had kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. I started to type a response, then stopped. What could I say? That I'd suddenly moved into a luxury townhouse courtesy of the Mafia boss who'd fathered my child. That my entire life had been upended in the space of 48 hours. Before I could decide, another message appeared on the screen. This one from Marco. "Good morning. Car will arrive at 10 to take us to the park, weather permitting. Is that agreeable?" The formality of it made me smile despite myself. I typed back a simple, "Yes," then set the phone aside, my mind still spinning with the impossible choice before me. The crux of it was simple. I could resist Marco's influence in our lives, fighting an uphill battle against a man with resources I couldn't begin to match. Or I could accept his proposal, or some version of it, allowing Emma to grow up with all the advantages he could provide, but tied to a world I still didn't fully understand or trust. Emma's cries through the baby monitor interrupted my thoughts. I headed upstairs, finding her standing in her crib, her little face brightening when she saw me. "Good morning, sunshine," I said, lifting her into my arms. "Did you sleep well in your fancy new bed?" She babbled happily in response, seemingly already adjusted to our new surroundings. Children adapt quickly, I reminded myself, but was adaptation always the right choice? As I changed and dressed Emma, preparing her for our outing with Marco, one thought kept circling in my mind. Whatever decision I made would irrevocably shape my daughter's future, and while I could pretend otherwise, the truth was that Marco Rossi had already fundamentally altered our lives simply by walking back into them. The question now was how much further I would allow him in. At precisely 10 o'clock, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside the townhouse. I watched from the window as Marco emerged, dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him, dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that somehow made him look both more approachable and even more handsome. The contradiction wasn't lost on me. I dressed Emma in a pale yellow sundress with tiny white flowers, her dark curls tamed with a matching headband. For myself, I'd chosen simple jeans and a blue blouse, items from my own wardrobe rather than anything that might have appeared in the closet overnight. "Ready to go see your daddy?" I whispered to Emma, the words still strange on my tongue. She bounced in my arms, excited by the prospect of an outing regardless of who it was with. Marco's face lit up when I opened the door, his eyes immediately finding Emma. "Good morning," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You look beautiful, both of you." I nodded, suddenly shy in the face of this more casual, more personal version of Marco. "The park sounds nice. Emma loves the swings." "Then swings she shall have," he replied with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. The car ride was surprisingly comfortable, Emma babbling happily between us in her car seat. Marco listened to her with rapt attention, responding as if her incoherent sounds were the most fascinating conversation he'd ever had. "She's very verbal for her age," he observed proudly. "She started early," I agreed. "The doctor says she's advanced in her development." Marco nodded, his expression turning serious. "I'd like to meet her doctor, review her medical records." The request reminded me sharply of the reality of our situation. "Marco, it's not negotiable, Sophia," he said, though his tone remained gentle. I need to know everything about my daughter's health and development. I've missed 6 months already. I sighed, knowing this was a battle I wouldn't win. Fine, I'll set up an appointment. He smiled, clearly pleased with my acquiescence. Thank you. The park was busy with families enjoying the beautiful weather, children running and playing while parents watched from benches. As we stepped out of the car, I noticed Antonio and another man I didn't recognize positioning themselves discreetly at opposite ends of the playground. Is that really necessary? I asked, nodding toward the security. Marco's expression hardened slightly. Always. He carried Emma to the swings, settling her into one of the baby swings with a gentleness that continued to surprise me. She squealed with delight as he pushed her, her little legs kicking excitedly. She loves it, he said, his face alight with wonder at this simple discovery about his daughter. I watched them together, my heart constricting with emotions I couldn't fully name. Marco Rossi, the intimidating figure who commanded respect with just a look, was completely captivated by this tiny being we had created. There was something disarming about seeing this side of him, the father, rather than the feared boss. We spent over an hour at the park, Marco insistent on trying every baby-appropriate piece of equipment with Emma. She responded to his attention with uninhibited joy, clearly enchanted by this new person who looked at her as if she were the center of the universe. She likes you, I observed as we sat on a bench, Emma dozing against Marco's chest after all the excitement. Of course she does, he replied with unexpected humor. She's a Rossi. Family is everything to us. I studied his face as he gazed down at our sleeping daughter. Is that why you want to marry me? Because of family? Marco's eyes lifted to mine, their darkness intense even in the bright sunlight. I want to marry you because the thought of not having both of you in my life is unacceptable. That's not exactly romantic, I pointed out. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. Would you prefer romance, Sophia? Flowers? Candlelight? I can arrange those things if that's what you want. I want honesty, I replied. Whatever else happens between us, I need that. Marco nodded slowly. Fair enough. He shifted Emma gently in his arms. The truth is, I have thought about you every day since you disappeared. I told myself it was anger that kept you in my thoughts, anger that you'd left without a word. But when I saw you at Bellini's, he paused, seeming to search for the right words. It was like finding something I didn't even know I'd lost. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. Marco. And then to discover Emma, he continued, looking down at our sleeping daughter, to learn that while I was searching for you, you were bringing my child into the world, alone. His jaw tightened. I should have been there. You couldn't have known, I said softly. I should have looked harder, he insisted. My resources, there's no excuse for not finding you sooner. The intensity of his self-recrimination surprised me. We can't change the past. No, he agreed, meeting my eyes again. But we can shape the future, our future, together. I looked away, overwhelmed by the certainty in his gaze. It's not that simple. It can be, he countered. Say yes, Sophia. Let me take care of you both, protect you, give you the life you deserve. And if I say no? I asked, the question that had been haunting me. Marco was quiet for a long moment, his hand gently stroking Emma's back as she slept. Then we find an arrangement that works. Shared custody, perhaps. You would still have the townhouse, financial support, security, whatever you need. But, his eyes met mine unflinching, but I will be part of Emma's life. That's non-negotiable. I nodded, having expected as much. And us? What happens to whatever this is between us? Marco reached out, his free hand covering mine on the bench between us. That would be up to you, Sophia. I've made my feelings clear. The rest would be your choice. The warmth of his hand on mine sent an unwelcome flutter through my chest. Despite everything, the danger he represented, the complications he brought into our lives, I couldn't deny the attraction that still simmered between us, as potent now as it had been 15 months ago. Emma stirred against Marco's chest, her little face scrunching as she woke from her nap. The moment between us broken, I reached for her, settling her in my lap as she blinked sleepily at the world around her. We should get her home, I said. She'll be hungry soon. Marco nodded, standing and offering his hand to help me up. The simple gesture felt oddly formal after the intimacy of our conversation, but I accepted it, balancing Emma on my hip as we walked back toward the car. The rest of the day passed in a strange domestic blur, feeding Emma, playing with her, watching as Marco absorbed every detail of her routine with an almost obsessive attention. He insisted on giving her a bath, his sleeves rolled up as he carefully supported her in the water, his face alight with wonder at her delighted splashing. "I've negotiated million-dollar deals with less tension than this," he commented as he struggled to dress a wiggling Emma in her pajamas. I laughed despite myself. Welcome to parenthood. By the time we'd settled Emma for the night, a comfortable exhaustion had settled over me. The past few days had been an emotional whirlwind, and the weight of the decisions before me pressed heavily on my mind. "Stay," Marco said softly, as we stood in the hallway outside the nursery. "Have dinner with me. Talk." I hesitated, then nodded. "All right." Unlike the previous night's elaborate catered meal, Marco led me to the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves again. "I'll cook," he announced. "It's been too long since I made a proper meal." "You cook?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. He shot me an amused glance. "My mother insisted all her children learn. She said a man who can't feed himself is no man at all." I perched on a stool at the kitchen island, watching as Marco moved with surprising efficiency around the space, gathering ingredients from the fully stocked refrigerator and pantry. "Tell me about your family," I said, realizing how little I actually knew about this man who wanted to become my husband. Marco's hands paused briefly in their work. "My father was Giancarlo Rossi. He built our family's business from nothing after we came to America. My mother, Elena, was his strength, the heart of our family." A shadow crossed his face. "They're both gone now." "I'm sorry," I said softly. He nodded, resuming his chopping. "I have 2 younger brothers. Luca runs our operations on the West Coast. Matteo manages our legitimate businesses, construction, real estate, the restaurant chain." "And you?" I asked. "What do you manage?" His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. "Everything else." The simple answer sent a chill down my spine, a reminder of what lay beneath the surface of this surprisingly domestic scene. "And your family?" he asked, changing the subject. "You've never mentioned them." I shrugged, the familiar ache dulled by years of acceptance. "There isn't much to tell. My mother left when I was 7. My father did his best, but he drank himself to death by the time I was 16. After that, I was on my own." Marco's expression hardened. "Foster care?" "For a while," I acknowledged. "Until I aged out." He was silent for a moment, his knife stilling on the cutting board. "No wonder you're so fiercely independent," he said finally. "You've never had anyone to rely on but yourself." The simple observation, delivered without pity, struck a chord within me. "I've managed." "You have," he agreed, his eyes meeting mine across the counter. "But you don't have to anymore, Sophia. That's what I'm trying to tell you." The meal he prepared was delicious. A simple pasta with a sauce that tasted of sun-ripened tomatoes and fresh herbs. We ate at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining room, the setting somehow making the conversation flow more easily. Marco told me stories of his childhood in Italy before his family moved to America, summers in Naples, his grandmother's cooking, the traditions his mother had insisted on maintaining even after they'd settled in the States. I found myself laughing at his tales of mischief with his brothers, seeing glimpses of a life far more normal than I'd imagined. In turn, I shared bits of my own history, the better parts at least. My dreams of going to college someday, my love of art that I'd never had time to pursue, the plans I'd had for Emma's future before our world had been turned upside down. "You can still have those things," Marco said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "College, art, whatever you want. I can make it happen." The ease with which he offered to fulfill dreams I'd long set aside was both tempting and unsettling. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he confirmed, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Say the word, and it's yours." I withdrew my hand slowly. "And what's the price for these dreams, Marco?" His expression sobered. "Not everything I offer comes with a price, Sophia." "Doesn't it, though?" I challenged. "If I say yes to you, to this life, What exactly am I agreeing to? Being the wife of what? A mafia boss. What does that even mean? Marco was quiet for a long moment. It means being the most protected woman in the city. It means never wanting for anything. It means giving Emma a family, not just a father, but uncles, cousins, a legacy. A legacy of what? I pressed. His eyes hardened. Power, respect, loyalty, the values that have kept my family strong for generations. And the cost? I insisted. The danger, the violence. Can you honestly tell me those won't touch our lives? Touch Emma's life? I can promise you this, Marco said, his voice low and intense. No harm will ever come to you or Emma while I draw breath. My world has its dangers, yes. But there is no safer place within it than by my side. The conviction in his voice was absolute. And despite everything, I believed him. Whatever else Marco Rossi might be, his determination to protect what he considered his was beyond question. I need you to understand something, Sophia, he continued, holding my gaze. I'm not asking you to accept or participate in the darker aspects of my business. That world would remain separate from our family life. Your only concern would be raising our daughter and making a home with me. A gilded cage is still a cage, Marco. Is it a cage to be loved, protected, to want for nothing? He challenged. Is it a cage to give our daughter everything we never had? The question hung in the air between us, impossible to dismiss. I thought of my own childhood, the instability, the poverty, the constant struggle. Then, I looked around at the beautiful home Emma now had. Thought of the opportunities Marco could provide her. The security of never having to worry about where her next meal would come from, or if we would have a roof over our heads. I'm not asking for your answer tonight, Marco said, his voice gentling. Take the time you need. Get to know me, the real me, not just what you think you know. His reasonableness made it harder to maintain my resistance. This Marco, the one who cooked dinner and bathed our daughter with such tenderness, was dangerously easy to imagine a future with. 1 week, I found myself saying. Give me 1 week to see what this life would be like, to get to know you. Then I'll give you my answer. Marco's eyes lit with triumph, though he quickly masked it. 1 week, he agreed, reaching for my hand again. And Sophia? Yes? His fingers tightened around mine. I intend to convince you that saying yes will be the best decision you've ever made.